welcome to all of you. Here is our esteemed panel.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And I'd like to invite Melanie Courtright from the Insights Association to lead off for us.
Thank you, Ray, and hi, everyone. So it's definitely an interesting time, a frightening time, a curious time for the Insights Association. We are faced now every day with dramatically different streets and restaurants and amusement parks, and airline terminals. We have overcrowded hospitals, and there's a sense of foreboding and anxiety. We're being introduced to shortages in supplies. There's a floating hospital off the coast of New York now, and government intervention in ways we have never experienced in our lifetimes. All of us are feeling it. In the insights and analytics space specifically, there are quite a few concerns emerging. They evolve around 4 core areas: business continuity, staff continuity, research continuity, and professional continuity. People are seeking advice on how to have continuity. They're seeking some sort of a normal, some sort of a way to feel like they have a sense of control over what's going on around them. In the business continuity, people are, the Insights Association has recently run a survey, and 30% are concerned about lasting and even viability concerns. They're concerned that their business may not survive this. And 3/4 believe that even if they do survive, either they won't survive or that there will be long-term impact. Most companies have seen at least some level of cancellation and postponement, and we're actually beginning to already see closing shops and layoffs. On the staff continuity side, people are wondering, how do I keep my people? How do I pay them? How do I keep them engaged in learning? How do I handle the remote needs? And how do I handle the security concerns around remote businesses? So we're connecting them with people who can help with those questions. We're seeing a lot around research continuity. Should we do any research? Is the data okay? Are response rates holding? How do I evolve and migrate my methods? So we're offering as much guidance as we can there. And then we're just seeing professional continuity. They're distracted, they're worried, they're having trouble putting their head down and focusing on the work in front of them. They're concerned about what it will mean long-term for them personally and for the industry and for them professionally. So we're seeing a lot of fear and anxiety, concern, worry, and as an Insights Association, we're just trying to answer these questions as quickly and honestly as we can. And point people to all sorts of resources, because we are one large and connected community and we really can help each other.
Thank you, Melanie. And are there any specific guidelines that have been given in terms of things like face-to-face research?
There are guidelines from SMR, guidelines from MRS, and the Insights Association has one that's going out this morning. In connected worlds, the advice is absolutely no in-person research and move everything as online as quickly as you can. And we have some data that says that 48% of online research, qualitative research that was in person is moving, and the rest is either canceled or being moved. So in-person research, at least in the US and in developed countries, is almost non-existent. And so, and then there are a lot of research and papers out there that talk to people about how to move their work online, and the Insights Association is hosting a webinar next week about precisely how to move offline and in-person work online, and the things to understand, the tricks to put in place, and the mistakes to avoid.
That's great, Melanie. I think we're going to all be talking about the need to help people who are making changes in terms of methodology, those people who are familiar with it. So, Kristin, can you add another dimension?
Yes. So I'm going to be speaking from 3 different positions this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. The first, from an investment banking standpoint, I work with Oberon Securities in New York, and I'm involved in a fair number of M&A transactions that are still in process at this time. Then, secondly, as my role as a growth strategist in consulting with different firms around the world, and then thirdly, as SMR Vice President, I can add some perspective on, what we're asking for from the industry. So first of all, from an investment banking perspective, I think, believe it or not, things really remain active, and we've closed, at least at Oberon, both equity financing and several sell-side M&A transactions in just the last week or so. So we're still seeing a relatively healthy VC and PE ecosystem. People still have money to spend, and I think it's important to realize that for these types of firms, they've got funds that are there for a very specific reason, and their job is to buy and fund companies, and that continues. I'm hopeful that we won't see much, if any, of a slowdown there, although certainly there is some slowdown in strategic buyers as they kind of scrambling to figure out, contingency plans for office closures and things like that. But we're still seeing an incredible amount of activity and interest in closing deals overall. From a growth strategy standpoint, certainly I think there's a lot of nervousness in the industry, and feedback that I've been getting from my clients is really differs based on their business. I have some that their business is going through the roof and they're super busy, and others that have had, literally every project in April canceled already. So what I've advised people to do is, really take a hard look at your business and prepare for different scenarios. I think that action brings relief for a lot of people. And if you have a clear plan about what you're going to do in different scenarios of your business, that can be super helpful. At ScaleHouse, we've offered to do free one-on-ones with C-level execs, just trying to be helpful. If you're feeling pandemic paralysis, is how I've termed it, and you just need someone to bounce ideas off, I'm happy to speak to people. But I do think that there, of course, as Melanie said, a lot of uncertainty in the industry right now about where things are headed. And then thirdly is SMR's perspective. And I think we're fortunate on this call because we've got 3 folks on SMR Council, Ray, obviously yourself, and then Lucy Davison, and we all sit on council. And it's, I think we've been looking at the situation as it evolves globally. And I think as a global professional and trade association, we're super committed to supporting folks, both now and the coming months as the situation kind of unfolds. And there's 2 main things that we're really encouraging people to do. The first is, really displaying financial responsibility. I think the economic impact of this pandemic on our sector is going to be disruptive and extensive for sure. And our ecosystem is comprised of many individuals and companies who may not have the financial resilience to survive those shocks, as Melanie mentioned. And I think it's just important for us all, whether you're a client, an agency, a supplier, to really work together and act responsibly during these times. Think twice before canceling projects, look at ways to adapt planned projects. And then certainly for clients, really think about your payment terms and their impact on the cash flow of smaller suppliers. It's super, super important. And then secondly, is this idea around pooling our collective brain power, which is, why in part at ScaleHouse we've put forward an offer to help at no charge. Many of us have already experienced, some practical challenges. If you've already pivoted to online focus groups and you've got a perspective on that, it can be super, super helpful for people that haven't done that before. And so I think together as an industry, we're stronger and more knowledgeable. And we're really looking at creating channels where people can share shared experiences and, look at things more from a lens of collaborative competition and thinking of our industry as a rising tide that lifts all boats, and trying to be as helpful as possible. And then lastly, I just, I want to, kind of respond to also what Melanie said about projects getting canceled. One of the things that I'm trying to convey to companies and to brands is that, to stop now monitoring consumers or people is really the worst thing they can do. I think, and Joaquin mentioned this in one of his posts on Joaquin Brecha, if you're not familiar with Joaquin, he's obviously the president of SMR. Joaquin had said, they're going to really miss the process of transformation of their customers. And once this is over, there's going to be a new paradigm that will have emerged. And it's going to be far more complex for brands to put the engines on, that late in the game. And so what I've been encouraging brands to do is, think about that very soon. Key stakeholders and executive teams everywhere are going to move past the immediate crises and start formulating strategies for what comes next. And, you know, if that's you, are you ready with the data? You're going to need to formulate those plans. So I think that's my advice on the brand side. And on the, you know, on the vendor side or the supplier side, I'd say I feel like this is a really good time to slow down and stop generic cadences and go deep on personalization and empathy and helping each other.
Thanks, Kristin. Lenny.
Melanie and Kristin, all I can do is echo everything that they said. That is absolutely what I am hearing, what GreenBook is hearing, what Gen 2 is hearing, kind of across the board on the kind of the fundamental shift in developed markets to digital. That obviously has huge implications, particularly the qualitative sector. You know, very challenging. I think from a GreenBook standpoint, what we have tried to do is look through the lens of what comes next and how do we help from a very compassionate perspective. So there's some things that we're working on, you know, right now around sharing information, and you know, look, I'm not going to enumerate all the things we're working on, but there's several things that we're fast tracking that we think may be able to help connect supply and demand in new ways and convey information and address those issues around just this lack of knowledge and uncertainty that everybody has, and increasingly looking at what is the future. We will get through this. We will get through this, and the world will be a different place when we are done with that. But that also means that there's going to be significant opportunities, and there already are. You know, there are sectors from the brand side, of the client side, that were just beginning to emerge that now are accelerating very quickly. You know, Uber, I'm seeing ads for Uber Eats drivers all over the place. So, you know, delivery, you know, those systems are going to grow. The Amazon is going to continue to grow. Actually, Amazon may come out of this most valuable company on the planet when all is said and done. So, you know, certainly from a supplier standpoint, when you're vertically focused and have you know, a series of clients in particular categories like hospitality or airlines, it's going to be a challenge to try and pivot and penetrate into new ones. But those categories are ramping up, and they have a real need to understand what's happening in consumer populations now as well. So it is not all doom and gloom from a business standpoint. There will be a retraction. There's no way around it. But there will be a restructuring that occurs. And that restructuring will create opportunities for all of us. Now, is that happening in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, you know, 18 months? Don't know, right? That's the wild card, and that's what's driving all of us crazy. But it will happen. And you know, I think as long as we can, as Melanie and Kristin said so well, you know, we're all in this together. Let's be compassionate. Let's try and find ways to collaborate as best we can to get everybody through. So as those opportunities start to emerge, we'll be in a far better position. And as researchers, we actually have a unique set of assets that can be helpful in this scenario. So I was on a call earlier with a pretty impressive group of folks on how do we effectively leverage research, leverage the data that we have, and leverage the capacity to collect data in new ways to understand incidents, right? This, to a great extent, this is an incidence issue, right? How many people are infected? What's the severability of that, infection rate, et cetera, et cetera. Those are things that researchers actually have an opportunity to step up and help in a significant way to understand those issues, you know, understand data collection, understand analytics, understand issues around privacy, and you know, help everyone get ahead. So, you know, let's leverage our skill sets in new ways while we're trying to navigate the new normal. And GreenBook is going to be collaborating with SMR and Inside Association and every other trade association in the world as well. We're going to try and walk our talk of being able to utilize our assets and our resources and reach in ways to try and help get us all through this.
Thanks, Lenny. And Lucy?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to work out what was going on there. I thought I'd unmuted it. I was just saying, I don't know if you heard me earlier, but yeah, it's really hard going last because everybody's said everything very, very well so far, and I completely agree. You know, certainly as a supplier to the industry, we're seeing some clients just cancelling projects immediately, and a lot of people in a lot of instant, slightly panic mode. We've, you know, obviously from the point of view of how the UK, the great British public has responded to this, has been, you know, a lot of panic buying, and if you can tell me where I can get some loo roll, I'd be really, really grateful. But on a broader level, what I was going to talk about previously is actually even more relevant, really, because what I was going to talk about was flexible working and looking after people's mental health in market research and how important that was. And I'm now faced with having a disparate team and only seeing people online, and you know, the whole idea of social isolation has come, you know, to the fore. And I think what's interesting is that actually we're learning ways of dealing with that, which I think are going to have long-term positive benefits for the business, because by reaching out more and making more structured effort using video calling and things like that, we're actually ending up spending more time talking to people and making sure that lines and channels are particularly open, which is something we should be doing offline anyway. So I've already noticed that I'm feeling less isolated this time around working from home than when I do it normally one day a week. So I think that's quite interesting development. And there are lots and lots of other things that people can be doing in terms of developing their connections with people and working out how to do that in a way when you're working from home. So I think actually there's some positives already I've seen coming out of this situation. And then as a marketing and communications person, I think, you know, the really key thing to do is to, for our clients to really think about how to do good marketing in this environment. And long-term brand building is what is going to help us out of this situation, and not the sort of short-term kind of sales tactical measures, but definitely some of the things like, you know, brands that are switching their capacity to, instead of making beer, they're making hand sanitizer, or I think there's a couple of brands that are doing that to kind of plug the gap, but it's also really good for them, and it's a really positive contribution. And then other brands who traditionally go on a lot about supporting their staff and putting people first, who have actually just asked a lot of people to take 8 weeks unpaid leave immediately. So I think it's about working out what your brand is truly about and how to communicate and articulate that in a positive way, and that obviously applies to our clients and therefore also resonates and applies to us in the Insights community. I know, Ray, you asked me to reference some of the stuff that the MRS are doing, and I think for anyone in the UK, there's some great advice which is on the website, which Jane has posted there, but also everyone should be aware of the MRBA, the Market Research Benevolence Association, which has funds for immediate support for market researchers who have found themselves in financial difficulties. And there's information about that on the MRS website, which is certainly worth looking at. And obviously we know that there are some government support packages out there which have been announced. But I would urge people, because I know a lot of contractors have had projects cancelled immediately, and as Kristin was saying and Joachim was saying in his video, you know, think really hard before cancelling your projects, and think about how you might be able to do them better online and continue, and don't mess around with your payment terms, and don't, you know, screw people over, because the fundamental thing is that at the end of the day, the people who behave well in this situation and who engage and support are going to be the people that come out of it best, and that longer term are going to be best placed. So that's what I'd like to say. And fingers crossed, we can all work together and support each other and come out of it stronger.
Thanks, Lucy. So in the Q&A, there is already one comment there from Alex. I urge you to have a look at that. Maybe give it a thumbs up, maybe add your own separate comment or question. I'm just going to wrap up two final pieces from around the world. So a few hours ago, I was talking to people from the governing bodies of AMSRS, the Australian Market Research Society, and RANS, the New Zealand, and they were talking about the initiatives, the events they were cancelling, the training they were putting online, the support they were offering. The New Zealanders have also come out and forbidden face-to-face research in that market. So a lot of things are moving. And of course, you can use the advice. You might be based in England and find the Insights Association advice best. You might be based in Seattle and find the SMR information is really useful. Don't think you just have to look after one set. There's all sorts of things out there. And probably my final point before we get into the general chat is all the organizations need to look at the wider context. We're going to talk about the ecosystem in a minute. But the wider context is our governments are trying to do things. So in France, the President Macron has said no company will go bust. Now, I don't know whether he can deliver that, but that is clearly the intent. So if you are running a company in France, you want to be finding out what's happening there. In England, the governor of the Bank of England has said, don't lay people off until you see what we can do. And they're rushing to make various things available. In the US, there's a lot of talk about maybe a citizen's wage. So people might be able to work for less because they're going to receive money directly. So as well as looking at what we can do, we need to look and see how do we fit into this wider picture. So the first, we got a suggestion there from Alex, and I'm going to pick up on one of his points, which is to broaden it into not just paying our debts on time, which is a really important point, but how do we protect the ecosystem so that when this is over, we have the specialists, we have the networks, we have the recruiters, we have the diversity of companies. Who would like to jump in on that?
I would. Ray, it's Kristin.
Yep. Unless I say stop, just move on.
Okay, perfect. All right, good. I was like, do I have to wait for confirmation? That's very unlike me. Well, first I want to say hi to Alex. Alex and I were ironically both in Greece. I'm still here, quarantined. Alex managed to make it back to Mexico, so he's in Mexico now. But anyway, I just want to say, hey, Alex, I'm still here. I think some ideas, kind of relate back to what I was saying before about this idea of collaborative competition, which is, people working together to stay afloat. I've had a couple calls this week already with people that were like, hey, I'm running like this type of firm. I don't have an online qual solution. And then the next call I have is with somebody that has an online qual solution, but doesn't have any clients for it. So it's like, can those companies work together on the same client to provide a service so that both firms are making money? And likewise, there's so many people that are having an influx of business, not just folks that are having downturns that need flexible work staff. And so is there an opportunity to share resources between companies, even in some cases, competitive companies? And so that kind of relates back to what I was saying at the beginning of my statement, Ray, which is, a rising tide lifts all boats, and we all need to be working together to keep the industry afloat now. And I think we need to keep a real open mind as to how we work together and where there are bigger opportunities for partnership than maybe what we've looked at previously.
Yeah, I'd like to jump on that for a minute, Ray. So I said I wasn't going to announce anything, but I will. Some of you may recall a couple of years ago, we thought that it would be cool to create a gig marketplace for the research industry called Savio. It never took off. It was one of those ideas, like I thought it was great. We're going to relaunch Savio as a totally free service with that goal of trying to connect with the assumption that everything moves digitally, that technology companies are going to need service partners to be able to address the demand. And as freelancers and even full service agencies are feeling the hit on this, to give them a new opportunity to collaborate with technology companies from a partnership standpoint. So is it going to work? I mean, the technology works, we'll see. But to your point, Kristin, right, finding ways to connect supply and demand, right, as as now the demand is shifting into digital scenarios. We have a supply of people that now have skill sets and a need for compensation, and how do we do that, right? So whether it's Savio or any other solution, right? It could be an Excel database, whatever, right? LinkedIn, doesn't matter. But encourage everybody to look at those ideas that Kristin said of, reach out to new partners that can address the need and help everybody share through this. And another point related is we've heard anecdotally that response rates are going up. Part of that is, yes, people are at home. Part of it is that consumers are looking for every single bit of money that they can get. So there is an opportunity for research to actually help from that standpoint, right? So let's look at our incentive solutions that we're offering to consumers, right? Let's be compassionate and see what we can do to increase that, so we can, even a couple bucks helps when you're unemployed, right? So the more that we can do to try and help in that virtuous cycle, I think the better off we're going to be. We have an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives right now, and that should be the overriding principle. We have to be financially responsible, yes, make good business decisions, but we can do that while trying to do good. And I think that focus on doing good will help drive a lot of the decision making and a lot of the success on how we conserve our ecosystem across the board, consumers and suppliers and clients, as we go through this.
So I'm going to flag up something which both is good and bad that I'm seeing happening at the moment. So Vox Pop Me offering to do some free services, good. Kristin offering the 1 hour, good. Savio for free, good. The bad side is when I see somebody selling under the guise of sympathy. You need to move your stuff online. If you buy our stuff, you'll be in a better place. That actually isn't. That's business like it was 2 weeks ago, not business like it is now. And if people think you're trying to gouge them because they're in a hole, even if they buy from you because they have to, you're going to destroy that relationship and you're not going to protect the ecosystem. So I think we need to be very clear about how do we protect the ecosystem. And I'm going to come back to one of the examples that Lucy mentioned, which is Louis Vuitton. They you mentioned the brewing companies and the whiskey companies, but Louis Vuitton have announced that they're going to stop making Givenchy perfume and various other types of perfume. They're repurposing the plant. They're going to make hand sanitizer, and they're going to give it to the French hospitals for free. Now, they could have done it. They said, we'll do it at cost, but actually the amount of money you get for a packet of hand sanitizer doesn't even have any relationship to what you charge for the bottles of perfume that they make. So it just becomes a much more straightforward, and it moves away from any criticism, and it establishes here is a French brand doing something for French people. And that's such a different impact.
Hey guys, this is Mel.
Yeah.
I want to just add, to this, how do we protect the industry? I think the most important piece is just to make sure that we provide good, sound advice on the realities of what's really happening. There's a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety, but we have data in front of us that from the corporate buyer side, they're not expecting massive declines in long-term research needs. In fact, many of them are saying that they want to do more research now. The data I have in front of me says that 61% say there'll be no decline at all in research spending, and 7% say there'll be some growth. Only 4% are seeing a large decline. And so while it's concerning and scary when we watch the empty streets around us, it doesn't mean that research has to stop or even is stopping. And so there's just a lot of opportunity, and we need to just be sure that we put data in front of people as associations, as leaders, that allow them to separate fear from fact. And we'll be sharing more of this kind of data with the global industry, just to give them a sense for what's really happening, as opposed to some of the conversations that are happening in the side streets, that you can get lost in what you're seeing just in your own little part of the world. But the corporate buyers are not pulling back too quickly. And I'm really excited about what that means for the long-term health of the industry.
And just a quick announcement on that topic. So I'm delighted that we have Jane Frost in the audience with us today. Jane is the CEO of the MRS back in the UK. She's highlighting that they have contacted the Chancellor, the Mayor of London. 80% of the UK's research industry is in London, so the Mayor is very relevant, and MPs asking for help and resources, uploading a useful advice, and in particular all the materials from previous conferences. So, and moving course online, so lots and lots of things going on. So I'm going to move on to a topic now where 2 or 3 different people have raised it, and I am going to have a different view to some people on this, but what people are saying is, should we still be doing research? I've got lots of customers in the finance sector who say, should we ethically be doing research? And other people saying, I've got customers, and I've had 2 or 3 contact me today saying, is the data going to be reliable when we collect it in these very strange times? So I don't know who wants to kick off first.
Oh my God. Can I take the one on financial services industry? It's Kristin.
Yes, by all means.
Yeah, I think, yes, of course, there's a lot of volatility going on in the market, but I also think that from an investor standpoint and for people in financial services, it is important, really important for people to understand how consumer perceptions are changing. And I think in particular, like for fintech companies, what's going on is a total boom. I mean, if you're like here in Athens, the only thing that is available food-wise, other than going to the market, is to have a food delivery. So like e-food apps, ghost kitchens, like all of these things that are sort of fintech related and are taking payments online are super, super hot and are just getting mad business. I think too that when you look at the investment community, there's a great quote from Robert Arnott, which is, in investing, what is comfortable is rarely profitable. So although there might be some less savvy investors that are looking at this as, a total meltdown, I think there's many of us that are looking at this as a total buy market. We're enthusiastic about the market going low and being able to buy more, and we're looking forward to a rebound. And so I think that those differences in attitudes and usage of financial services products right now are super, super important to understand.
Yeah, let me chime in with a little personal experience. So when the recession hit, Rockhopper, my previous company, our biggest category of business was financial services. And we saw a massive decline immediately in that category because that category was impacted. That was a liquidity challenge within the financial services industry. It was a systemic issue that finally came home to roost. That is not this issue right now. So there is, as Kristin said, there is plenty of liquidity in the markets. Mm-hmm. And the central banks are making sure that continues. Now, will that last long term? Who knows? But for the moment, I think absolutely what Kristin said. The consumers, their fundamental concern is the safety of their family and their ability to take care of their family financially. So the financial services is the mechanism to do that, right? To make sure all the money is flowing, to make sure that there is loan opportunities, to make sure credit is extended. And the banks are in a good position. They are flush with cash. So I would agree there is no reason. It is quite the opposite. We should be absolutely doing more research in that category because it is one of the most stable that there is. Always bear in mind that the stock market is not the economy. It's an indicator of the economy.
That's correct.
But it is not the overall economy. So and like Kristin, I'm making bets on stuff too. I think it's time to buy. So I've been buying.
Great stuff. Time to buy.
I bought some Uber stock last week, and I'll tell you, I'm glad I did. So Uber Eats, right? I mean, those type of things are, they're going to grow. We will get through this. But those categories should be more than ever reaching out to consumers and talking to them. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll give a researcher point of view, if I may. And I'll just say, what I think Ray might have said that he was going to say. Will there be differences in the data right now compared to 2 weeks ago and compared to 2 months from now? Probably.
Yes.
There will be elevation of fear, elevation of concern. People may be wanting to spend based on the fact that they may be afraid they're not going to earn as much as they would have in the next couple months. There are a lot of people in the world who live on the fringe of being able to buy groceries. And so if you run a pricing study right now, are you likely to get some of that in your data and have it be data that helps you short term, but not data that reflects long-term plans? Absolutely. I still am a big believer. I've been in the research for a really long time. And if it was my brand, I would still be doing research for a couple reasons. One is I would want to see where it lands at its peak of fear and impact. And then I would want to watch it start to sort of moderate back down and see where it lands when people land into their new normal. So I would want to watch that flow very carefully. I would also want to know right now, what do I need to do to help my customers right now? What changes can I make right now to help them? And then maybe perhaps drop some prices for a short period of time and then bring them back later. So I would be doing more research right now, but is the research is reliable, the research is real, it reflects what people are feeling right now. And will that be inflated due to fear and concern? Absolutely. But you want your research to really understand that and to watch the peak and the valleys appear in the data. And you also want to know when it reaches back to its new normal. You won't know that if you're not continually measuring. That's my point of view.
So Joachim, earlier this week, the president of SMR said, think twice before you cut a research project. I think I completely agree with that. But I will also say, think twice before you continue a research project. And so why do we need to keep the research? All managers everywhere in the world are managing a situation that nobody alive has had to manage. We need to go back to the First World War and the Spanish flu before we've had this sort of disturbance. So everybody is flying blind. We know that evidence matters. But to pick up on what Melanie was talking about, the vast majority of the stuff you need at the moment is tactical. It's how do I cope this week, next week, the next few weeks going forward. This is not the time to be launching. Oops, we're getting some feedback there. This is not the time to be launching a new strategy, a new product in most cases. Now, if your new product is going to allow people to get food delivery, you might still well do that. But if your product is going to be simply a better version of what you have at the moment, or it's going to allow people to organize their future holidays, any of those sort of things, you want to be looking at it and say, well, it's probably not relevant. In the UK, Jaguar Land Rover have closed their factories. They're not going to be making cars. That has got an implication for the sort of research you need to be doing in terms of customer satisfaction, test drives, and that sort of thing. But also coming back to what my three colleagues have spoken so far have said, you absolutely need to be finding out, what do people need? What do people think you're doing right? What do people think you're doing wrong? How could you do it better? And when does it change? Because we don't know how long this is going to take. It could be a couple of months. Spanish flu lasted 3 winters, 2 years. So you have to plan for a short and a medium and a long-term version of what we're going through. And for that, you definitely need research, but you don't need all the research that you've been doing over the last couple of years. Everything wants looking at and has to justify itself.
I think where it's going to hit badly is going to be on those kind of advertising, communications research, those short-term campaigns, that kind of stuff. But clearly, to Melanie's point, we absolutely have to understand how people are behaving and what their views and how they're changing. And the opportunities are absolutely massive from the point of view of brands in terms of understanding that, tapping into that, and then actually understanding what the new normal does look like. So while, you know, yes, BMW have also cancelled closed the Mini factory, and, you know, various other short-term decisions which are completely 100% understandable until we, you know what's going on. Until you know what's going on, and to find out what's going on, you need to understand, you need to be doing research. So from my point of view, yes, I mean, it's short-term shock, but I'm hoping that people will calm down and then think long-term and start planning scenarios and getting the data they need to support that. Yes, that's all I wanted to add.
Hey, Ray, can I add, sorry, it's Kristin. Can I add just one thing before we move on to the next topic?
Yes.
Women in Research is actually hosting a webinar on March 26th. Rebecca Brooks, who's the founder and CEO of Alter Agents, just happened a few months ago to run a proprietary study that they're doing on fear. So 4 things driving fear, and the fear is affecting, unfortunately, it's just specific to Americans, but how it's affecting Americans and how it's changing their shopping behavior. So if there's, people on the listening in today that are kind of looking at trying to understand consumer fear and how that changes buying habits, like that would be a great webinar to sit in on. And I believe registration is still open for that on the Wire website.
Thank you so much. Lucy, if you could mute yourself when you're not speaking, we're picking up a bit of interference off your mic. I think it's yours.
That sounds fantastic.
And then unmute yourself when you want to jump back in. So I'm going to pick up on something that Phyllis has mentioned in the discussion and expand it. So some people are going to find they've got more time on their hands. Some are going to find they've got less time on their hands, especially if they're working and looking after their children simultaneously. And they would like to use learning opportunities, but quite often those learning opportunities are expensive. And is there something maybe the industry should be doing across the board to put in place some opportunities for everybody to do some learning without the normal costs? Given, of course, that would hit the revenues of MRI, it would hit the revenues of SMR, it would hit the revenues of the Insights Association, MRS, and so on. But is there something that could be done?
Well, I can tell you that the Insights Association is doing free webinars as much as we can, and we're offering a lot of free papers and free access to online webinars for people who are in learning mode. So yes, the answer is yes. We should be doing that. We should be helping, and we are to the extent we can.
And Ray, I mean, you kind of led the way with NewMR in the way that you've been doing these, week-long learning and festivals for some time, and I think there's something we can all learn from. I think if we have to think about changing the format from sort of large in-person attendance conferences with people having stands, I think we can get some really great content shared in this way, and we can be completely able to give knowledge. And we don't, SMR would definitely right now sharing a lot of content and information we've got about past virus cases, but the fact is that actually we can do this for everything, and there's no reason to suddenly stop sharing knowledge and delivering knowledge to people. I'm certain that we're going to longer term have different strategies for how to deal with these kinds of situations, and I think people are going to really benefit from it.
Yeah, I think, Lucy, we've got, 6 upcoming webinars that SMR has scheduled now. So everything from how to successfully switch to a virtual office, to switching to purely online research methods, to focus groups, the impact of COVID-19 on research quality and bias. I mean, there's a myriad of webinars that we have scheduled just up in the next coming 2 weeks. So I would, if you're on the SMR side, I would say check those out for sure. The one thing I would say, and we've talked about this at SMR, but also Mel, I know you're working on some of this stuff at Insights Association. I think one of the things where we really fall down as an industry is just offering practical business advice. Like, we get so hung up on education about research methods that we don't oftentimes offer a lot of support for business owners and how to kind of get through tough financial times like this. And so I would encourage all the associations to also really focus on business content for executive teams and for owners, and to create more support circles for those folks.
Yeah, that's great. Today's town hall for the Insights Association is very business focused. We're talking about, we have 2 lawyers who are going to talk about HR practices and who are going to talk about contract clauses. And last week we had someone talk about managing a business through crisis. And then next week we're hoping to do econometrics. And so we're very focused. One of the biggest requests we've gotten, and one of the biggest thanks we've gotten is, thank you for helping us figure out as a business how to manage through this.
Yeah.
Which is going to be much more focused on how to manage your business and how to grow your business. And I think that should still be perfectly available and run online. Obviously, the summer school thing, as far as we know right now, but those kinds of things are absolutely essential. I mean, I've done crisis PR courses myself in the past, and I think that there's a lot of stuff that we can learn. There's lots of resources and learning available right now for people if they need it, which would be able to support them in this immediate short term.
Okay, Ray here. I'm going to move us along to another topic.
Really quickly, before you do,
okay.
Jane is saying that the MRS site also has best advice they can find on finance and government help for those who want. I would really advise anyone on the call who hasn't done so to visit their association's websites. I know that the MRS and US have very practical, like SBA loan type links that are available to people.
And that's mrs.org.uk, mrs.org.uk. So we've got an interesting question here about health, because obviously what's happening in fintech is different to what's happening in airlines. And it's going to be different to other categories. And I want to call out big praise for Lisa Courtright. In one of the online discussions I'm involved in, she's very senior in Merck, obviously in pharma. She's a person of fantastic standing in the global and the North American research world. And she made the point, we should not be surveying doctors and nurses at the moment. Those people have got more important jobs to do. And I think that was a really useful observation. And I think that the question here is talking about a campaign that's going to run in the third quarter of the year, which is in the fall in the Northern Hemisphere. Should we be researching that? One of the things that I would massively say is you've got to research whether the campaign is viable. For example, if we jump topics for a second to recycling, now is not a good time to run a campaign about how to do recycling better. People can only worry about so many things at the same time. So the first thing I would say about the campaign that this organization is thinking about is to do some research and say, can it be run now? And if it can be run now, how should it be run now? What are the triggers that make sense?
No, I agree with you. So it's really important right now to attitudes and behaviors and concerns about healthcare are in massive flux right now. And so what might have worked as a message a couple weeks ago might not work as well 3 weeks from now. So while you may not want to do, pricing research or something that gives them additional thing to worry about, you absolutely want to be doing messaging testing and seeing how people are reacting to anything in the healthcare space.
For sure. Agree.
If anybody else would like to type in a question, we are running towards the end of the time slot, so you better get it in now. Lenny, to you.
Yeah, so we've kind of touched on this, that whether we should be doing research, et cetera, et cetera. One thing we have to recognize is, and Melanie hinted at this, historical norms are probably not going to be very useful going forward. So certainly not in all cases, but in many. We do need to understand that this is a game changer scenario. There will be long-term massive societal, cultural, financial, just massive changes as a result of this. There's no way around it. Some things will absolutely get back to normal the way we've always kind of thought about normal. But we truly are entering an era of the new normal. And let's recognize that. So the dependence on historical norms, we can look at it as a benchmark for comparison, but we can't look at it as the benchmark of that is right, because they're probably not right anymore. And let's recognize that. So
yeah, I think that's a really important point, though. They're extremely valuable for knowing where we were and where we land. And
Yes.
and research now will help you see the peaks and valleys around where we were and where we land. But it's a good point that we're not trying to get back to what they were, but we definitely want to know where we landed compared to where we were 6 months ago.
Yeah, we're doing some research right now in GRID, right? GRID is in the field. And we've decided, we looked at last Wednesday. That was the old normal, right? So we're already separating the data to look at compare differences within this sample from last Wednesday to now. And we've seen differences already. So, yeah, we're right there with you, right? The historical trending data is going to be useful for comparison purposes, not for predictive purposes. So we have to develop new norms that can be useful going forward. So more reason to do research because we need new data now.
So we're coming up to the end of the hour, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for all of those pieces. I'm going to ask you all in a moment to give one piece of advice, and I will give my piece of advice, which will give you some thinking time to be able to do that, and then we will go through the thank yous and the close downs. So my piece of advice is, wherever possible, and I'll talk about when it's not possible, cancel, don't postpone. So looking forward over the next 2 to 3 months, you've got an event that isn't going to be sustainable. You want to do a training initiative. You want to do a company away day. You're holding a running event, whatever it is. You probably want to cancel it because times are not going to be normal. Sorry, you want to cancel or postpone because times are not going to be normal. This is not going to go away before June. It's not going to go away before July. So that becomes that. You're going to say, after this is over, coming back to something that Alex said very much earlier, we're going to do this. And after this is over, we're going to do this. That is fine, but don't try to put a date to it because you'll end up postponing and then repostponing and just spending energy on that. When can't you postpone? When there is a big when can't you cancel? And do you have to postpone? When there are big financial commitments. If you've got non-refundable deposits, if you've got contracts in place, yeah, you're going to have to postpone and maybe postpone again. But I think the starting position for everything is either cancel or go online and just talk about after the pandemic, or as Alex said earlier, PP, post-pandemic, but don't try to put a date to that. So we'll go in order on the page. Melanie, a piece of advice.
I guess my biggest piece of advice would be don't suffer alone. If you have a question or a business problem, or you're worried about how you're going to make payroll, don't suffer in silence. Reach out to the people on this call, the associations, the business people around you, and if it's a business question of how to handle with staff, or seek advice, seek counsel, seek resources. There's a ton of people around who want to help. And then, if I can give a quick second one, it's stay in learning mode, stay really open and listening, because when we end up on the other side of this, it's the people who have really learned the most through this that'll be able to lead the way forward.
Fantastic advice. Kristin.
Yeah, to play off of what Melanie just said, I think there's a great quote from Darwin that I posted on LinkedIn a few days ago, that those who survive are not the strongest or the most intelligent, but the most adaptable to change. And so I would say, to Melanie's point, decisiveness is really key here. Sitting around and waiting for the phone to ring is not really an option in these times, and nobody ever regrets making fast and decisive adjustments to changing circumstances. So, if you've got questions, if you need help, please reach out to the people on this call, but please don't sit around imagining the worst can happen, because I can guarantee you, having worked my way through both the .com crash and the last recession downturn, like there's plenty of opportunity here to be had.
Thanks, Kristin. Lenny.
Echo Kristin and Melanie, and would just add, remember that we are human. There is an absolute human component to this. So be compassionate and be helpful, and just try and do good, right? This is brownie points time. This is building up the karmic bank time. I'm a firm believer in those things. What goes around comes around, right? So all those old saws, they are meaningful now, even from a business standpoint. They are meaningful. They're kind of universal truths for a reason, and they play in the business world. So don't forget the human element. You know, call employees, touch base with them, call colleagues and friends. You know, just let people know that we're all in this together.
And Lucy.
Yeah, I'm again going to build on that, but my feeling is that the one word you think of is the word generous. I think in this environment, you need to be generous with your time. You need to be generous with your resources, with your staff, with your projects, with your ability to connect, and with sharing and with partnerships. And it costs you nothing, ultimately. And in the long run, it will put you in a much place. It's definitely all about karma, Lenny.
Thank you for everybody who's attended. Thank you, panel, for joining us.